Hey guys, Snupy here. It's about that time. 11.1 is out. The new season has just started. So it's time to make a Feral Druid PvP guide covering everything that you need to know going into this new season, from rotation, gear, builds, and beyond. Also how to survive as a Feral Druid, as that's a big pain point for many players. It's going to be timestamps down below, so you can jump to the exact part of the guide that you're looking for, or just watch the whole thing, which I do recommend. Enjoy the video, and let's dive into it. Before we jump into the actual rotation part of this video, I'm going to quickly cover the two builds we're going to be playing. There are two main builds. One is more cleave heavy, and one is more single target heavy. The only difference there really is that one build has Primaraph, and one build has no Primaraph. Primaraph applies rip AoE, which means you don't have to like manually rip each target, which is very handy when there's many stacked targets. But as you know, if you play WoW PvP, that's not always going to be the case. Big maps, or just 2v2 arena, or even 3v3 arena, where like certain comps just won't be as stacked. Into more pet heavy stuff as well, the Primaraph Cleave build is really strong because these rips that you apply to pets will proc you bites from Apex Predator's Craving, which by the way also works now with the 4 set. When you consume Apex Predator's Craving, become a big winner, dealing 900,000 physical damage to Apex Predator's primary target and decreasing the damage of a periodic effects by 16% for 6 seconds. So, I don't know why I'm dead, by the way. So, our tier set is also going to really work with Apex, which kind of adds some value to playing Primaraph. But yeah, so yeah, two main builds. Keep that in mind. Again, as what maybe it's very clear. You play Primaraph when there's many stacked targets. If you can cleave actively, it's really good to play. If you're not going to be able to cleave, you want to skip this and just go with normal rip. For example, often in 2v2, there's not going to be much to cleave, and then it's not going to be worth playing Primaraph. Now, looking at the trees in general, the Feral side is the same pretty much as it's been the last few years, so not much changing there, or at least the last year. Now, in the Druid tree, we see some very interesting changes. Blizzard reworked the Druid tree, made it way better. Everything is way more accessible now. We can pretty much get what we want without having to go through things we don't want, which was the case for a long time, and it was painful. But yeah, so Druid tree is good now. There's not really much to think about here in terms of changes if you played the last season, but things are just easier to get. We get more points into what we want. New talents like Circle the Wind, but it's just passive. We do have a talent called Symbiotic Relationship. I've tried out a bit. I don't really recommend it. But talents like Innervate and Vigil are now way more accessible. So these might be some that we pick up in certain scenarios. And by the way, join my Discord because I'll keep the builds updated there always, and also post kind of new fun builds. But in general, I think you want your build to look something like this for the single target. And for the cleave, pretty much the same thing. We're just going Primaraph, skip one Tireless Energy, and it's the same thing pretty much. Sometimes grabbing Typhoon can be great, very situational. Same with like Mastery, if you're facing like Beam Hunter, DK and stuff, it can be massive value grabbing Mastery over Vortex. Just keep that in mind that like the fine details, especially in this part of the build, can change quite a bit depending on what you're facing. But it's not going to be that big of a deal if you just play with it with the same talents always as well. Those are the builds. The two main builds are going to be linked down below. Now let's talk about the PvP talents and then head into the rotation part of the guide. So the PvP talents have actually changed a little bit because we lost King of the Jungle, which was a great PvP talent we had that increased our healing received when we had rip on many targets. This has now completely been removed, and Thorns has also been changed. Now it's a passive effect. When you skin, Thorns is applied. It can still be spell stolen and stuff, so just keep that in mind. And also like seems to be doing a lot more damage now than it did last season. The main thing here that's going to change game to game, or like what you're playing, for example in Shuffle, is Wicked Claws. So it's a healing reduction effect, which means you don't really need this if you have that effect on your team already. For example, you're playing with a warrior, a hunter, a rogue, a monk. They're going to have this effect covered, and they don't stack, so then you can skip this. Sometimes if you're cleaving, I still like playing it just because you can spread it on everything very easily for that rot pressure. But generally speaking, if you're playing a comp that has it already, you don't really need it, which means you can skip this. And for example, grab High Winds. Really good talent. Helps getting clones from far away. Can actually stack this also, the 5 yards from High Winds, with the 5 yards from Astral Influence and get crazy range on Cyclones. But it's not really worth getting double Nurturing Instinct to get there normally. But it can be quite fun to do. Now, Thorns, of course, is more into melees. If you're going to be taking heavy melee damage, grabbing Thorns can be worth it. While Strength of the Wild is pretty much solid all around the table, if that's the saying. You just get more tanky, more off-healing, and it's really, really, really solid. So, when it comes to Feral Druid PvP talents, ask yourself, what am I playing and what am I facing? And do you need Thorns? Do you need Wicked? And that's pretty much going to guide you all the way there. Another strong PvP talent, Savage Momentum. If you're landing kicks, is going to reduce the CD of your Fury, Wall, and Dash. Also very, very strong, especially because of Fury. There's also a good option into casters. So I'll kind of just give you guys an example here to make this very clear. So for example, if I'm playing Jungle Cleave in 3v3, which means Hunter, Feral Druid, Priest, my Hunter has the healing reduction effect covered, which means I don't need this. Then I could, for example, go... I'm starting to like set the scene right now. Let's say we're playing jungle and we're facing Ret, Warrior, Healer. So 2 melees. I don't need Wicked. I'm probably going to get trained down very hard. Then I can grab Thorns. Like this. But now let's say if I'm playing FMP, Feral Mage Priest, into Ret Warrior... Thorns will still be pretty high value, but now I need Wicked. We need that healing reduction on our team as the mage doesn't have it. And then maybe I still want Thorns. I could, for example, trade out High Winds and grab Wicked. Now, this is kind of a simplified version. Some maps, High Winds might be higher value because it's going to make landing clones from range way easier, especially on big maps. But I would say just don't overcomplicate it. Ask yourself, do I need Thorns? Do I need Wicked? And that's going to get you like 95% of the way there to getting the optimal PvP talents. If you had like any more specific scenarios, you could ask me in the comments below. But yeah, now that's the builds, PvP talents handled. Let's dive into the rotation. Okay, now for the burst opener rotation for the single target build. And then we're going to do the Cleave build right afterwards. They are actually quite different rotation-wise because Prime Wrath does change quite a lot. But yeah, first, single target. So again, the build is right here. We have no Prime Wrath. A few things to keep in mind as we're doing this opener. Blood Talents, 3 different generators. Within 4 seconds, will give you 25% more damage on the next 3 rips and bites. It's massive. You can also play Lion Strength if this sounds too complicated. But it's not too bad. Trust me. You can just proc it by just playing because you are going to use these abilities anyways to get comp points. So Fury, also, of course, keep that in mind. Incarn, massive burst in the opener. Usually just want to use this early in the game, so it's going to come back fairly soon, and you can get it and often win on that second Incarn, as the damage is going to be really, really high. Also, Apex, we're going to be potentially proccing bites if we're lucky, so just throw those bites in there as you proc them. And keep in mind, after biting, your bleed damage will be increased by 10% because of Sabertooth. All your damage, overtime effect. And this should also be stacking with our 4 set. This is PTR that we're getting with Apex Predator's Craving as well. With that being said, let's do it. So, we're going to be using Fury and Incarn instantly as we open up. Then we're going to Rake, Feral Frenzy, Swarm, Moonfire to proc the Blood Talents, and then Rip, Slash, Bite. At this point, you want to start kind of re-procking the next Blood Talents. So you can, for example, do a Shred, maybe a Slash again, Bite, do another Rake or Moonfire, maybe even spread it on a different target to get a new Blood Talents and just keep biting. So yeah, I'm going to showcase it now, but like, keep in mind, bottom right, you're going to see the exact order I'm pressing things in. You can slow it down and watch it back. Let's do it. So, Fury, Incarn, open up, Feral Frenzy, Swarm, Moonfire to proc the BT, Rip, Slash, Bite, do a Shred, Bite proc, double bite then. Maybe do a Rake, Moonfire again, do Blood Talents. We can Slash, Bite, do a Shred again to proc a BT EC. New BT is up, and keep biting. Bite proc again, bite again, reapply the rip. Again, really focus on having bleeds up. So like the feral rotation is really just maintaining bleeds and reprocking bloodhounds. Just keep doing that. Now, when it comes to shred, some ferals really over shred. It can be very handy when it comes to reprocking bloodhounds when all bleeds are up, because you know if you rake or moonfire, you're just gonna be wasting some energy in a way. But don't over shred. That's gonna make you starve on energy real quick. Now that opener was one example. Often you're going to be doing triple stunts. So instead of biting as much, you're going to be doing maims and maybe a triple D or rake stun afterwards, like this clip's going to show right now, to land kills early in games. Usually, actually, you're going to be doing more stunts and not just the one rake stun. Especially if you have teammates also damaging, you locking them down can really score kills early on or force a lot of CDs. And one thing that I do want to add is the pandemic effect, which means when a bleed is almost off, if you reapply the bleed in a certain window, the time that's remaining will be added on the new one. For example, like this, with the rake. Start glowing red, and I can reapply, and the time is left is added on it. I tracked this with a add-on called Better Blizz Plates. You can get that. I actually have a video on that, which I'll try to remember to link down below on all my add-ons and how I set that up. But yeah, so when it comes to the actual rotation, maintain bleeds, reproc BT, going to be stunning pretty much off CD, or off DR rather, off the diminishing returns to get full stun value. But let's do an opener now. It's going to lead it into a full go, kind of how I would play it in a game. Fury, Rake, Incarn, Feral Frenzy, Moonfire to proc the BT, but I'm going to maim instead, then apply the rip, and then, for example, start biting. There's 3 stuns. Instead of ripping, I can also bite. There are many different variations, and as I kind of mess around with it, try things out. But that's also one that you can do. Then, same thing, maintain bleeds, keep rocking BT, and just do damage. So for the Cleave build, it's actually quite different from the single target, even though this is one talent change, really. But this does change things up a lot. So with this build, the goal is going to be to spread pressure on as many targets as possible. It's less about pinpointing one target down and bursting him, and more about that overall DPS. But even with this build, sometimes locking down one target is going to be scoring you kills. So don't like neglect focusing one target at times, but overall, focus on the overall pressure. The opener. We got 3 targets here. Pretty perfect to cleave, especially when they just stand still and do nothing. But yeah, we're going to be Furying, Incarning instantly, Rake, Feral Frenzy, Swarm. You can Moonfire now to proc a BT, or you can Slash, it's going to be stacked, and then get the BT. Then Prime Wrath, everything. Then you can keep slashing, shredding, proc those BTs. Again, very important. Same as the single target build. And just keep reapplying those Prime Wraths as much as you can. While you're biting with the bite procs from Apex Predator's Craving. So one question I get, is it worth to Prime Wrath again and again when there's many targets stacked? The answer is yes. It does do good cleave pressure. Again, find the balance there. Sometimes doing like double bites with a bite proc and 5 comp points can score you a kill or force some big cooldowns. So be open for that as well. Let's open up though. So Fury, Incarn. Okay, I actually kind of messed up here, but it's all good. Rake, spread the bleeds, keep spreading bleeds. Maybe do one more rake stun, proc a new BT, reapply, rake, bite, moonfire, bite, proc a new BT, reapply again, rake, and just keep biting. So I said I messed up there because I swarmed before the frenzy. Very minor mistake, doesn't really matter. But they actually want to frenzy before the swarm to really min-max the damage. Now, one more thing that I really want to kind of zone in on is Berserk Frenzy. Your comp point generating abilities will create a bleed. This bleed is going to do a lot of damage when you're cleaving. And you spread this the most effectively by using Brutal Slash. So if you can slash many targets as you're incarning, that's really going to amp your damage up. Sorry, I'm trying to find when because it bugged out right here. Frenzied Assault. 14 million damage in that opener. Insane. And again, this is from slashing. So when you're incarning, guys, look for slashes on as many targets as possible. Again, any generator will do this bleed, but slash is the most effective. So really, really focus up on that. But yeah, so after the opener, you've stunned different targets, you spread the bleeds. Again, if a target's falling low, throw some bites in there. Try finish. Try force some CDs. And also cycloning, you know, might be a part of this as well. This kind of opener. Usually, you're going to be using Heart of the Wild after your Incarn to help land Cyclones. Going to make it way faster. But yeah, we're going to talk more about the Cyclones later in the video. But yeah, using Heart to land clones and cloning in general is very, very, very important for Feral Druid. But yeah, so let's say with full bleeds. Second go comes up. Let's say we've no Incarn. Maim, Feral Frenzy, Swarm, Big Bite. Hit him with like a DR bash, maybe, for the kill. And there we go. Again, rotation, maintain bleeds, including Moonfire optimally, but it's kind of less prio. Main thing is rip and rake. Throw in bites with the bite procs, with Apex. There's one more very important thing that we need to talk about for Feral Druid in terms of creating pressure and also alleviating pressure, and that is cycloning. Knowing when to cyclone is very important. With that being said, I do think that some people really overcomplicate it as well. I think the best way to kind of look at this, the most simple way, is to think, what is my cyclone achieving? Is it either creating pressure or alleviating pressure? Or even better, both at the same time. This means, let's say if we're doing a go, if I can cyclone the healer or maybe the other DPS so we can't peel, that's going to really help us create pressure. Now, let's say this warrior is popping every CD on my mage friend. If I can cyclone the warrior, that's going to alleviate pressure. Now, it's very simplified, of course, but this is really the best way to look at it. If you're just cloning, it's not really doing anything. It's not creating pressure. It's not alleviating pressure. That's when you don't want to clone. Let's say if I'm in Incarn, and there's like a third DPS. He's not really doing much. He doesn't have CDs up. And I just clone him instead of doing damage, which I should be in Incarn. That could be seen as a bad clone. Even that, though, sometimes can be good. Let's say you force a trinket. Then you can maybe swap him or something. But just like think, like, what is my cyclone achieving? If you cannot come up with like what this clone is achieving, you shouldn't do it. And this kind of comes more with experience and playing a lot. Because again, if you're not doing bleeds like earlier, bleeds is very important. Some ferals forget about bleeds. They just start spamming cyclone the whole game while they're getting kicked, they're getting stunned out of form, and they just die. And that is pretty much like the worst scenario to be in. Is where you're not doing any pressure, you're trying to clone, you keep getting kicked, keep getting stunned, it's not landing, and you're just not in form, you're not doing damage, you're not in bear form, taking less damage, and your clones are just not achieving anything. So, again, I can talk a lot about this. There are so many different scenarios where different things can be argued for. But just ask yourself that question, like, what are my clones achieving? Record your own gameplay, watch it back, and, like, ask yourself, like, this clone, did it do something? Or should I just be creating pressure instead? Because without pressure, you're not going to win games. And often it's about having pressure rolling. So use clones to create more pressure or alleviate pressure, or again, better both at the same time. And then you're going to be climbing rating fast. So as the recording of this video is very early in the season on Retail WoW, I can't really showcase all the gear. But thankfully on the PTR, we got all the vendors. A few things I want you guys to keep in mind before we dive into the gear though. First thing, this is subject to change. There might be some tweaks later on in the season. Who knows? But this gear is going to be very, very good. And also, I've not been able to finalize it perfectly on the PTR, but I'll explain that once I get there. So, let's go through it. One very important thing is that our tier set is no longer on the chest. Instead, we're grabbing it on the headpiece, shoulders, gloves, and legs. They've actually changed the stats, so now it's pretty good to just skip the chest piece instead of skipping the headpiece. With that being said, the embellishments you want is the Elemental Focusing Lens. It's going to proc some damage. It's really, really strong. You can put it on both the rings or other items, but both the rings is a nice place to have them. For the rest of the gear, I'm just going to go through it quickly. Crafted neck. For the cloak, I just got the Conquest piece. Here you can also craft or get the one from Warmongering, World P, early on. The wrist, I've just bought Conquest. Again, this can also be crafted with Verse Mastery easily. And that's going to be the case for a few of these items. The weapon, we got the Verse Mastery Conquest Staff. Trinkets, Medallion, and Insignia. Again, rings with Verse Mastery, Elemental Focusing Lens, and also a precog gem for the fake casting. Feet, same thing, can craft these, Verse Mastery, or if you prefer some more haste, go for this version. Legs, tear piece. Waist, same thing again, you can craft it. Again, I'm on the PTR, guys, so it's not really been optimized. Waist, you can also craft Verse Mastery. And then also gloves, we got the Haste Verse. For the gems, the main one is going to be Versatile Onyx with Mastery and Verse. If you feel a bit squishy, you can get the more Verse heavy one, but this one's really, really good. For the enchants of the ring, we're going to get some Radiant Mastery. On the weapon, Authority of Radiant Power and Stonebound Artistry are both very good options. Currently, I'm still leaning heavier into Authority of Radiant Power, but this might change. Just keep that in mind that both of these kind of are good. And some ferals use one, and some ferals use the other. For the boots, Scout's March. For the chest, Storm Rider's Agility. For the bracers, Chant of Armored Speed. For the cloak, Chant of Burrowing Rapidity. And for the legs, Stormbound Armor Kit. The reason I didn't apply them all is because I want to actually show you guys the enchant name. Sorry about this being a little bit scuffed because I'm on the PTR, so it's not quite exactly the best way to show it. But hopefully that explains it nicely. And now into the last part of the guide. So for the final part of this guide, I want to leave you guys with some tips and tricks. Kind of touch on how to survive as a feral druid. And also some comps to play in the new season. So let's dive into it. A lot of feral druids struggle with surviving, okay? They get trained down, targeted, they don't really know what to do, and they just die. I want to quickly kind of address that. I get a lot of questions about this. So as a feral druid, I like you to think about it like this. You have 3 main lines of defense. The first one being your mobility. You're one of the fastest specs in the game. You can get away from the danger before it even starts, and that's going to be the best way to survive anything. It's just not being in danger in the first place. By kiting properly. You do this by using your trial form, but also calf form with dash, stampeding roar, and things like wild charging to teammates, or just doing it in trial form and just jumping away. But basically, getting away and trying to like read the game a bit. For example, if the enemy is popping a bunch of cooldowns, you might want to bounce. Oost, great, based. But yeah, so kind of try to read the game. If the warrior is going very, very hard, you might want to get to a pillar, throw in a root, and just try to line it before the trouble gets too bad. Now, if you can't run and you can't escape, bear form is your second line of defense. For example, you're going to get stunned by a storm bolt, a kidney shot, any stun. If you are in bear form, the chance of you living is increased drastically. So try track stunts and such. And also enemy CDs. If you can't escape, sit bear form and tank it that way. Don't just tank damage in cat form. Many ferals just die this way in shuffles and such. They don't kite, they don't bear form, and they're just dead. So yeah, that's the second line defense. Now, the third line of defense is your defensive abilities. And I want to say, you want to combine all these lines of defense, right? You can kite with skin. You can skin in bear form. You can even kite in bear form. Especially with stampeding roar, or again jumping away to teammates and getting to a pillar. But yeah, third line will be your defensive CDs, like mainly bark skin, survival instincts, but also frenzied regen, and also things like vortex and such can also help a lot. And again, this is a very important thing, but combine these different elements to become very hard to kill. That's the main takeaway here. Now, the comps I'm going to leave you with are some classics. For 2v2, the best comp to play is Disc Priest, Feral Druid. But if you want to try some double DPS, I recommend Feral Druid Affli, Feral Druid Red Paladin, and Feral Druid Shadow Priest. Those are some of my favorite comps. You can also try Feral Druid Hunter 2v2, but that's pretty rough. But in 3v3, Feral Druid Hunter Priest is going to be great. Probably with MM or BM, it seems, at the moment, but probably all three specs will work here. Also, FMP, Feral Mage Priest, is going to be great. Exactly which mage spec is going to come out on top, I'm not quite sure yet. It's still very early in the season. But yeah, Feral Frost Mage, most likely, I think. Then you have a bit comps that are a bit more under the radar at the moment that might work well, like Kitty Cleave, Feral Warrior Priest, for example. Zombie Kitty or Ebola Cleave. Feral Druid DK Healer could also be worth trying out. One comp that I played today was Feral Druid Shadow Priest in threes. We played it with a Mistweaver, but maybe a Holy Paladin would work better. That also felt quite good. Now, those are just a few comps. Feral Druid can actually play with most things, and you can make it work. But those are a few comps that I'm gonna recommend you guys in this guide. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.